Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and we're back at it with another spoiler video, this time for Lorwyn Eclipsed, which is a set that I'm really excited about because we're finally getting back to in-lore Magic the Gathering. Universes within, not universes beyond. And I'm incredibly excited about that in general, but I'm also really excited to go back to Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, which have merged, and now it's half Lorwyn and half Shadowmoor at the same time. There's a lot of really cool things going on with this set, and there's a lot of really cool cards that they've spoiled right out of the gate. So we're going to dive right in and get to it. Before we do, please like the video. It helps me get it out to more people. It helps the channel grow, and I would appreciate it so much. I honestly mean that. Also subscribe if you're new so you never miss any of my content. We got a bunch of spoiler content to go over the next few days, and still a bunch of crazy deck techs coming out of Through the Omen Paths, aka Spider-Man. So hit that subscribe button because you are in the right place. Now let's dive in. First off, it's worth pointing out that the duels that we didn't get, the shock lands, the 5 remaining shock lands that we didn't get previously in a standard set are now finally coming to standard in this set. So we have Blood Crypt here, which is the Rakdos dual land. We've got Hallowed Fountain, which is the Azorius shock land. And then we've got Overgrown Tomb for Golgari, Steam Vents for Izzet, and then Temple Garden for Selesnya. So we already have 5 in standard. We're getting the other 5. That's incredibly exciting on its own because now we're going to have 10 shock lands and 10 verges, which is basically a 3-color aggro player's wet dream. So I'm really excited to try to brew some kind of 3-color aggro deck moving forward because this mana base is going to be insane, especially with Multiversal Passage now in the mix. I think it's really nuts. But next up we've got Figure of Fable. This is a 1/1 creature Kithkin for just 1 mana in the colors of Selesnya. It's a hybrid mana. She seems very excited about it. You are not a hybrid mana. For 1 hybrid mana, this creature becomes a Kithkin Scout with base power and toughness 2/3. And then for 3 mana in the colors of Selesnya, if this creature is a Scout already, it becomes a Kithkin Soldier with base power and toughness 4/5. And then for a whopping 6 mana, if this creature is a Soldier, it becomes a Kithkin Avatar with base power and toughness 7/8 and protection from each of your opponents, which is kind of insane. There are some pretty cool things you can do with this card, like imagine playing like Leyline of Transformation and naming Scout, and then you can just jump right over those first 2 activations and go right to the 6 mana activation and immediately turn it into a 7/8 with protection from your opponents, which is kind of gnarly, although I'm not sure if it's worth it jumping through all of those hoops to get a Leyline of Transformation into play just to still have to pay 6 mana. So I don't know how good that actually is, but the fact that you can do it is pretty cool. Most notably, I just think the fact that it's a Kithkin is going to matter, and if Kithkin Tribal ends up being really good in this set, just having a 1/1 for 1 that gets all of your tribal benefits is going to be good if you can then have a mana sink to dump all of your mana into late game. So I think this card is really cool. Next up, we've got Mutable Explorer. This is a 1/1 creature shapeshifter with Changeling for 1 green and 2, and also when this creature enters, you create a tapped Mutavault token. This card is nuts. First of all, I absolutely love Changelings. Every time we get access to Changelings in Standard, I try to like cross-pollinate, cross-synergize like 2 different tribes at the same time and use a bunch of Changelings at the core, and it's usually really fun just finding the 2 most powerful tribal payoffs among all tribes and jamming a bunch of Changelings with them, and I'll probably try to brew something like that. It's also going to fit really well into my Throne of the Grim Captain deck, which a lot of people have forgotten about, but that card is going to be nuts with Changelings. It's already almost nuts enough by itself because we have a couple Changelings from Bloomburrow, even though they're kind of crappy, and we had that 1 red Changeling from Foundations. So it's already a deck that people have forgotten about, and it's already really good, honestly. But with a bunch of Changelings potentially coming in this set, it's going to be even better. And this card in particular, making a Mutavault token is nuts, because not only does it ramp you an extra land onto the battlefield, even if it is tapped, but it's a land that can become a creature that is every creature type. So you essentially get 2 Changelings for 1 card, and one of them is a mana dork, is basically how it feels. I think this card's actually really nuts, and I can't wait to brew with it. But next up, we've got 𝑠IG, Wanderwine Wisdom. This is a legendary creature merfolk wizard, a 2/2 that can't be blocked for 1 blue and 1. And when it enters or transforms into 𝑠IG Wanderwine Wisdom, target creature gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you draw a card until end of turn. And this is a flip card. This is demonstrating the light and dark, Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, half of the plane being Lorwyn, half of the plane being Shadowmoor. There are a bunch of denizens within the plane that can transform back and forth kind of at will. Not exactly at will. You have to jump through certain stipulations, usually requiring you to pay mana at the beginning of your first main phase or your upkeep or something like that. In the case of 𝑠IG here, at the beginning of your first main phase, you can pay 1 white, and if you do, you transform him. He becomes 𝑠IG Wanderbrine Shield. Still a 2/2 merfolk, this time a rogue instead of a wizard. Still can't be blocked, but now, whenever this creature transforms into 𝑠IG Wanderbrine Shield, target creature you control gains protection from each color until your next turn. And then at the beginning of your first main phase, once again, you can pay 1 blue to transform 𝑠IG. So he's really cool. He's always a 2/2 that can't be blocked, which honestly might be really good on its own in some kind of like a weird Azorius aggro deck. But then every other turn you get access to potentially drawing a card when you hit in for damage, or giving something protection from every color so that it can get in unblockable in addition to 𝑠IG being unblockable, and also just have protection from removal and all sorts of other crazy shenanigans your opponent could get up to. It's honestly a really interesting mechanic, just flopping back and forth and back and forth, and you have to keep transforming it if you want to keep getting access to these abilities, because they only trigger when they transform. So if you just leave it as 1 forever, you basically are only getting a 2/2 unblockable. But if you can manage to pay that 1 mana each turn, you can keep going back and forth and back and forth, and it doesn't exile and come back into play when it transforms. It just flips, so it doesn't have summoning sickness or any of that. It just keeps flipping back and forth and still being a 2/2 unblockable, which I think is actually really interesting. I'm excited to see what other kinds of cards are coming that utilize this mechanic. But next up, we've got Ashling Rekindled. I remember Ashling from back in the day. Really, really cool card. This is a 1/3 legendary elemental sorcerer for 1 red and 1. And when it enters or transforms into Ashling Rekindled, you can discard a card, draw a card. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay 1 blue if you do transform Ashling. So no matter what, you're paying 2 mana, you're jamming a 1/3 on the board that can block pretty decently, and you're getting to rummage. You're getting to discard and draw. And then when it flips for just 1 blue mana, it becomes Ashling Rhymebound, a 1/3 legendary elemental wizard. And whenever this creature transforms into Ashling Rhymebound, and at the beginning of your first main phase, which sets this card apart from the other transforming card that we saw, you get to add 2 mana of any one color. Spend this mana only to cast spells with mana value 4 or greater. That is a small price to pay. And then if you want, at the beginning of your first main phase, you can pay 1 red, and if you do, transform Ashling again. It becomes Ashling Rekindled again, and immediately lets you discard a card and draw a card again. So you can go back and forth every single turn. And every other turn, you get to discard a card, draw a card, and every other turn, you get to turn the 1 mana you're spending into 2 mana of any color, which fixes you and ramps you, which is pretty relevant. But what's cool about this one is if you just leave it on Ashling Rhymebound to the backside, it can just stay that forever and give you 2 mana of any one color at the beginning of your first main phase, pretty much every turn, right, from that point moving forward. In fact, you don't even have to play this. You do have to play it in an Izzet deck, excuse me, because you're going to need the red to play the front side and then the blue to transform it. I was thinking if you can flip it to the back side, you don't ever need to flip it back, so you don't need that red mana. But you do need the red mana to play the card to begin with. But either way, spending 1 mana to transform it and get 2 mana is going to be nuts. You could play this on 2, turn 3, turn what would be 3 mana into essentially 4 mana, and 2 of them is whatever color you want. Drop a 4-drop on turn 3. And that way, it's almost going to feel like a Llanowar Elf, while also being a decent blocker, while also just continuing to get you 2 mana every single turn, as long as you have a 4-drop or more to play with it, which is kind of crazy. The one deck archetype I'm the most excited to use this in is a Reanimator deck, maybe a Grixis Reanimator deck, because on turn 2 you can drop the Ashling, discard your reanimation target to draw a card, and then next turn pay 1 mana, transform it, go up to 4 mana, use your 4 mana to play your Zombify or any 4 mana reanimation spell to bring back the thing you discarded. So with just one card, you gain the ability to set up your reanimation target and ramp you to play a 4 mana reanimation spell on turn 3. And you still have a 1/3 body to boot that's defending against aggro. I think that's going to be incredibly powerful, so I can't wait to build that deck. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are even more crazy decks that you can build with Ashling. I think this is a card that's deceptively good. I don't know if people are going to appreciate it. Well, they probably will appreciate the backside. That's just straight up good, right? But I don't think people are really going to necessarily right out of the gate appreciate just how good the front side into the back side lines up for something like a Reanimator deck. I think it's really, really awesome. Next up, we've got Ashling's Command. Speaking of Ashling, this is a Kindred instant elemental for 5 mana in the colors of Izzet. So they're showing off here that they're utilizing Kindred within the set, which makes sense because back when Lorwyn first came out, the tribal mechanic was prevalent there, where certain spells, instants, and sorceries would be a certain creature type, even though they were an instant or sorcery. And this is essentially that, except they updated the wording to Kindred instead of tribal because Watsy gonna Watsy. But it's really cool. There are some synergies you can utilize with this. We won't know the full extent of Kindred synergies until we see the entire set spoiled, but it's definitely setting us up for a lot of potential. And then the spell itself for your 5 mana does allow you to choose 2 of 4 different abilities. The first one I want to point out, even though it's the last one of these abilities listed, target player creates 2 treasure tokens. So in this way, your 5 mana spell can feel like a 3 mana spell. If you give yourself 2 treasure tokens back, essentially 2 mana back, it ends up only costing you that 3 mana investment to get any one of these other abilities. So keep that in mind. That is a route that you can take with this card. But you get to choose 2. Create a token that's a copy of target elemental you control. Target player draws 2 cards. Ashling's Command deals 2 damage to each creature target player controls. And then the final, target player creates 2 treasure tokens. A lot of versatility here. Having a board wipe, a pseudo board wipe for aggro, card draw, copy of any elemental, or just making mana ramp that will also mana fix you that you can save up for the next turn and maybe play like a 7 or 8 drop, which is kind of crazy on its own. There's a lot of versatility here. There's a lot that this card does. And is 5 mana too much? I'm not sure, but I think it has a lot of potential. I think if there was ever a 5 mana instant that had the potential to actually see a lot of standard play, this might be it. But next up, we have our first mythic unveiled. This is Morning Tide's Light, a sorcery for 1 white and 3. Exile any number of target creatures. At the beginning of the next end step, you return those cards to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control. Until your next turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to you, and then exile Morning Tide's Light. This card's really interesting. First of all, it's a sorcery, so you can't get up to shenanigans on your opponent's turn or anything like that, which means that for the most part, this is best going to be used as a flicker spell to flicker your own things and re-trigger their enters the battlefield abilities, or potentially leaves the battlefield abilities, depending on the card. But being able to do that while also preventing all damage done to you until your next turn almost kind of makes this feel a little bit like the One Ring, which I sort of like. You do have to exile Morning Tide's Light, which means you can't just keep bringing this back and using it over and over and over again, which would be busted since it prevents damage every time you cast it. But it can be used in a lot of interesting ways. One thing I want to point out about this card, now that we've gone over a few of the transforming creatures in this set, is simply the fact that this returns the cards to the battlefield on their front side. So anything that has transformed into its back side, whether it's one of the transforming cards we've already seen, or maybe a different kind of transforming card that we haven't seen yet, all of those things are going to come back onto the battlefield on their front side. And you can exile your stuff and your opponent's stuff, which is really cool. So you could essentially get rid of their blockers, for whatever creatures of yours you don't exile, and also exile your stuff that you want to re-trigger their enters the battlefield abilities, and then their creatures come in tapped. So it is actually kind of a downside for you, because your creatures are going to come in tapped and then you won't be able to block. Their creatures are going to come in tapped and be able to be untapped at the start of their turn. So the tapping doesn't do a whole lot. It does potentially shut off the ability to use well, I guess it doesn't shut off the ability to use instant speed tap abilities for your opponent, because they would come back in with Summoning Sickness anyway and wouldn't be able to tap. So that tapped is just a downside for you, it seems. But it'll be worth it if you can get rid of their blockers to swing in with some of your stuff, and then also re-trigger your enters the battlefield abilities on some of your own stuff that you want to flicker. I guess your stuff being tapped, though, actually doesn't matter because you're preventing all damage, right? I keep going back and forth with this. You're preventing all damage that would be dealt to you until your next turn. So even if your stuff comes in tapped, it kind of doesn't matter. And maybe you can use things with tap abilities. Well, you'd still need haste. But there is that blue enchantment that allows you to untap everything at your end step. That would be kind of cool. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of interesting ways to use this card that we're not really seeing yet, and I'm excited to see what those might be. If you have ideas that I haven't gone over, definitely let me know in the comments, because I think there's a lot of potential with this one. Next up, we've got Bitterbloom Bearer. This card is just gross. A 1/1 fairy rogue with both flash and flying for 2 black mana. That on its own, not super good. It's still okay. Flash is good. But at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 blue and black fairy creature token with flying. This is a BitterBlossom at instant speed attached to a flying 1/1 for the same amount of mana as BitterBlossom. This is just a power crept BitterBlossom, which is absolutely nuts. Although I do want to point out it's not strictly better than BitterBlossom, because it being a creature itself means it does die to creature removal. It's easier to get rid of than BitterBlossom. But at the same time, there are just as many instances where this could end up being better than BitterBlossom, because you can flash it in during your opponent's end step after they've already used their mana and they don't have anything held up to use as removal, to make sure that you at least get 1 token off of it and still get to swing. And in that case, if they did have enchantment removal, you would be flashing in it in a point where they wouldn't even be able to use it anyway. Like if you have removal that hits any non-land permanent, could hit an enchantment or a creature, then all of a sudden Bitterbloom Bearer is better than the Bitterbloom Blossom, because they can each equally be hit by that removal, but this can be flashed in after they've spent their mana so that you can make sure it's safe for at least 1 trigger, and gets to swing in as a 1/1 flying and ping them a little bit, right? Plus, since it's a creature, you could clone it and make multiple, you could flicker it, you could bounce it to your hand in response to removal and replay it. There's a lot you can do with this card. I'm super excited to build like a flash tempo deck. I already have a really cool high noon deck that a lot of you guys on the channel have probably seen, and I'm kind of obsessed with like using high noon with flash, and this would fit in perfectly to a deck like that. That deck doesn't use black right now, at least my version of it doesn't, but it will absolutely use black when Bitterbloom Bearer comes out. This is going to be a great inclusion, at least for a new version of that you know, goes into black rather than one of the other colors. Right now it's Jeskai. It's a Zorius splash red, so kinda Jeskai, kinda not. It's got a very small splash of red. But either way, even in other decks that aren't that, I think this is going to be sick. In Fairy Tribal, it could be sick. Heck, in Rogue Tribal, it might even be good. And since it's a Rogue, it's an Outlaw, so maybe you build this into Outlaw Tribal, and since it's spitting out tokens all the time, maybe it's in, I don't know, maybe it's in an aristocrat style deck or a sacrifice deck. The dogs love sacrificing, apparently. But I digress. I think the card is going to be sick all over the place. But I do just want to point out, it is not strictly better. It is in some ways, but it is not strictly better than the original BitterBlossom. Whatever. Next up, we've got Emptiness. Evoke is back. This is a 3/5 elemental incarnation for 6 mana in the colors of Orzhov. 2 black-white hybrid mana, so it doesn't have to be an Orzhov. It can be mono black, mono white, or anything that includes black or white, which is pretty cool. But then it's going to do different things depending on the colors that you have access to. So if you are running Orzhov, the card gets a little bit better. It's a 3/5 for 6, but when it enters, if you paid 2 white, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Also, when it enters, if you paid 2 black, you put 3 -1/-1 counters on up to 1 target creature, and then it has Evoke for 2 mana in the colors of Azorius. So there's a couple different things you can do with this. First of all, you can play it for just 2 mana, and if it's 2 black, use it as removal to put 3 -1/-1 counters on something, which even if it doesn't kill the thing, still ends up being relevant. It leaves behind board presence, right? That thing is going to get a -3/-3 nerf for the rest of the game, and most of the time just be removal, which is really, really good. But then it's also a creature entering that immediately has to be sacrificed after you get that ability off because of the Evoke ability. So for 2 mana, you get 3 -1/-1 counters on something, and potentially this extra creature you can get value off of by, like, maybe sacrificing it to a sacrifice outlet that you have for extra value, or maybe flickering it so it comes back into play as its big side, but it won't really trigger any of its enters abilities if you do that because you're not spending mana. But there are other ways you can utilize this even when playing it as Evoke, which is really awesome. You can use any number of spells which say when something dies it comes back onto the battlefield to get it back. You can do a lot of cool things, but since its abilities only trigger dependent on the mana that you spent, a lot of those busted ways to take advantage of, you know, cheating this into play or whatever aren't going to get you what you really want out of the card, which are these abilities. But it's still super versatile. For 2 mana, you get 3 -1/-1 counters and a body you can maybe get extra value out of by sacrificing in the moment. And you also have the option of pivoting and spending just 2 white mana to get that same body that you can maybe utilize in the moment for sacrifice fodder or whatever, but also bring back a creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So at the very least, in an Orzhov deck, a card that can be your 2 mana bring back a 3-drop thing for, like, Oculus or whatever you want to do can pivot and be removal. That's better than strict removal because it leaves behind the counters even if it doesn't kill the thing, and still potentially get to use the body before it gets sacrificed. So there is a lot of value here, and then if you top deck it later on when you have a ton of mana, you just spend 6 mana, and as long as at least 2 black and 2 white was spent, you get all of the abilities and the 3/5 sticks. So a lot of versatility here. Really cool seeing the incarnations come back with Evoke. I think this is going to be a really good card. Next up, we've got another incarnation with Evoke. This is Deceit, a 5/5 creature elemental incarnation for 6 mana, this time in the colors of Dimir, again hybrid mana. When this creature enters, if double blue is spent to cast it, return up to 1 other target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If double black was spent to cast it, target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-land card from it, that player discards that card, and it evokes for 2 again. So you can do some really cool things with this as well, being able to make them discard their best card, or bounce their best permanent for just 2 mana, something that can pivot between the two, and even just feel like sort of like a charm. That's kind of good in and of itself, just having access to either one of those two mana abilities on the same card, that you could potentially use the body for something to get a little bit of extra value as well before it gets sacrificed. But then you also have the ability, again, just like the other one we saw, to pay the full 6, hit double black and double blue, keep the 5/5, and get both of these abilities. So later on in the game, if you top deck it, it's a ton of card advantage. It's kind of like a 3-for-1. Not strictly because you're just bouncing something. It's more like a 2.5-for-1. But still, it's a ton of value. And I'm really excited to see the rest of these elemental incarnations because I think they're really awesome. But next up, we have the last card that they showed. This is Erdoo, Carrier of Dawn, a 5/5 legendary creature elemental god for 2 white and 3. It has flying, it has lifelink, and creature spells you cast have Convoke. So you jam this down for 5, and then you just tap all of your creatures to play out your whole hand, which seems kind of sick. As if that wasn't enough, at the beginning of your first main phase, so the turn after Erdoo comes out, at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay 1 black to transform it, just like some of the other transform cards we saw. It becomes 𝑖𝑠𝑖𝑙𝑑, Carrier of Twilight. These are kind of like the gods, each one the god of one half of Lorwyn, either Lorwyn or Shadowmoor. Obviously, 𝑖𝑠𝑖𝑙𝑑 being the god of Shadowmoor. It is also a 5/5 flying lifelink, so the body stays exactly the same, except now each other non-token creature you control has persist instead of the convoke thing. So the front side allows you to tap all your creatures to vomit out your whole hand to get a ton of creatures out, and then if you flip it to 𝑖𝑠𝑖𝑙𝑑 while you still have a board, now everything gets persist, and when it dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter. So if you could just survive that 1 turn cycle and flip to 𝑖𝑠𝑖𝑙𝑑, well, now all of a sudden you can protect your whole board, make it so even if they wrath the board, everything comes back just with a -1/-1 counter on it, which seems kind of crazy. It's also worth noting that these transforming legendary creatures are good too, because you can transform one to the backside and then play another one from your hand if you have one just wasting space in your hand. So there is a way to get extra value out of these, which I think is cool. And then obviously at the beginning of your first main phase, you can pay 1 white to transform it again. I like that all of these transform costs are just a single mana, so it's really easy to just set aside 1 mana and not commit most of your turn to being able to flip these things. You're able to still keep up mostly with the tempo of your opponent, which I think is really powerful. So, you know, getting to convoke everything on the front side and then protect your board with the back side, and then maybe after, maybe you just even want to cast a wipe yourself, cast a board clear yourself, wipe the board, kill everything on your opponent's side, everything on your side comes back with a -1/-1 counter, and then maybe afterwards you decide the next first main phase you hit, you flip it again, and you get back to the front side and you turn on the ability to convoke out a bunch of stuff in your hand all over again. Being able to go back and forth whenever you want is really cool, and being able to keep it on the side that you want, if that's the best place for it to be, is also awesome. And like I said, it's all 5/5 flying lifelink no matter which side it's on. So no matter what, it's going to be a lot of board presence and a pretty good beater. It is worth noting that if the 𝑖𝑠𝑖𝑙𝑑 dies to removal itself, if you wipe the board, say, it doesn't get to come back with persist. It says each other non-token creature you control has persist, so it doesn't give persist to itself. Although if you have both the backside and a new copy comes down as the front side, the 𝐒𝑟𝑟𝑑 will get the persist, which is kind of cool. But I just think this is really cool. I think it's a really cool mechanic. I can't wait to see more cards from this set and more cards that are transforming cards like this. I want to see if there are other costs other than just 1 mana. I want to see if there's other ways to transform other than waiting for the beginning of your first main phase. It'll be really interesting to see what else is coming in this set. But that's going to do it for our first official unveiling of spoilers for Lorwyn Eclipsed. I think this set is super exciting. I can't wait to get back to in-lore Magic the Gathering, universes within Magic the Gathering. I'm pretty excited about it. Let me know how you feel about the set below. Let me know what ideas you might have for card combinations or decks that I didn't touch on in this video if you have any cool ideas. And a ton more spoilers and deck techs are on the way. So make sure to like, subscribe, do the thing, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.